And so the challenge becomes more about, well, how do you get the right technology to the right person at the right time?
Hello and welcome to the Digital Dose, a podcast brought to you by EBO. We're here to explore how technology is reshaping healthcare, one digital innovation at a time. I'm your host, Trudy Kerr, and in this episode, we're diving into an important and timely topic: beyond validation. Waiting list validation is crucial in helping healthcare organizations manage demand and prioritize care. But what happens after that? How do we keep patients informed, motivated, and supported while they wait? And what role can technology play in making that experience more human and effective? Joining me to discuss this and so much more are my co-host Richard Samuel, Healthcare Director at EBO, and our special guest, Liz Ashall-Payne, Founder and CEO of ORCHA, the world's leading digital health evaluation and distribution platform. First of all, Richard, hello. It's been a while, but it's lovely to be online with you again.
It's great to see you again, Trudy.
And Liz, we're so happy that you could join us. It's an absolute honour to have you on the podcast today.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you, first of all, for inviting me to join today. It's a real pleasure to be here. So I am the founder of ORCHA. I think it's really important to mention that my background is clinical. So I started my career nearly 30 years ago working in complex paediatric care, and I worked in the NHS for around 20 years with a real passion of driving more healthcare to more people. So I also sit on Tech UK board representing SMEs for technology companies. So yeah, I'm really delighted to be here.
So Liz, thank you. I want to start with the big picture, because the NHS has been working incredibly hard to manage growing waiting lists and maintain patient communication. And we know how important it is. And Richard, I just want to bring you into the conversation right at the get-go and ask you, based on your experience as a former NHS England director and NHS chief executive, what are the biggest challenges facing the NHS right now when it comes to managing waiting lists and keeping patients engaged?
Thanks, Trudy. It's a really good question. And we acknowledge that whilst the NHS is absolutely making improvements and the latest data shows we are starting to cut into NHS waiting lists, the challenge that the NHS is managing is on a scale and level of complexity that we've rarely seen before. Right now, there are over 7 million active open pathways of patients on elective waiting lists in England. And within that, there are a number of people, many people, in fact, appearing more than once for different conditions in different hospitals and across multiple specialties. So it's not 7 million separate journeys. It's a large number, millions of overlapping ones. And from a patient's perspective, that can be confusing and stressful. And so whilst we've made real progress, and we should be really proud, and the NHS should be proud of its progress in validating those lists, confirming who still needs treatment and understanding the prioritization process, that's only the beginning, really. The real opportunity now is to move beyond validation into much more proactive engagement. And if we use this pre-appointment phase, as we call it, well, it becomes the key to unlocking transformed experiences, outcomes, and productive care, and unlocks things like straight to test pathways and better triage. So kind of by better understanding a patient's symptoms and readiness and preferences early, we can often direct them straight for investigation or even redirect them to a more appropriate service. And that means faster diagnostic, fewer wasted appointments, and better use of clinical time. When people don't hear from the NHS, they reach out. In one hospital we work with, nearly 30% of switchboard calls were from patients checking whether their referral has been received or asking for clarification about what they should do next. And that's avoidable workload created by uncertainty. But it also shows that people want to engage. The challenge is meeting that demand in a sustainable way, and that's where digital comes in.
So I want to bring this back into the context Richard, of AI. So how does AI, particularly this conversational AI, changing the way that trusts can handle the scale of that communication and that complexity?
AI is one of the enablers. And I think we'll come on to here. I'm sure Liz will mention it, but I'll start by saying one of the great ways in which we can empower individuals is by the use of well-designed digital therapeutics and tools that help people understand their condition better and give them and equip them with the tools and knowledge to take more control of their journey, including this kind of waiting period. In this instance, conversational AI comes into play. It enables the NHS to have human-like two-way conversations with thousands of people simultaneously, collecting data on symptoms, updating records, allowing individuals to identify where they have changes in circumstances, helping to direct people to alternative services where appropriate. It also allows to understand what the needs of individuals are and to help them find the resources and tools that they need in order to better support their journey through the health and care system. And where conversational AI is so powerful is its ability to adapt its tone and language and its approach to engagement. It can be done via the telephone, via traditional web-based channels or virtual agents, so that communication feels natural and inclusive and indeed personalized for each person. So rather than replacing staff, it extends their reach. It keeps patients informed. It supports shared decision-making. It identifies those ready for earlier intervention while reducing the uncertainty that effectively drives so many unnecessary calls and visits into the health sector.
I'm wondering if, Liz, you have something to add to that, because Richard did mention you.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we look at the world of digital health technologies that we can use as individuals, there's actually over 350,000 available as of today. That means that there is a technology out there that can meet his personal preferences and needs. Now, the first question we have is, can we trust those technologies? The short answer is we shouldn't just trust everything. Our research has found that less than 20% are safe and effective, but even within that 20%, you've still got a vast quantity of technologies. And so the challenge becomes more about, well, how do you get the right technology to the right person at the right time? And as you've already been discussing, if you take something like waiting lists, of course, we want to validate that the person still wants to be on that waiting list. But if we can get the right safe technology to the right person at the right time, actually we can help them wait well and help them to be better prepared in a very personalised way. And so within this ecosystem of digital health technologies, what we're obsessed with, we're known for assessing and quality approving technologies, but actually our big mission is improving lives by distributing and providing access to personalised technologies. And so in that waiting list validation process, if you can piggyback on the back of that waiting list validation process and ask the person who's waiting what they're struggling with, be it pain management, be it stress, anxiety, weight loss, smoking cessation, we can then know which technologies are safe and give that technology via that communication channel to that individual. And the beauty of that process is that no clinician has to touch them. We don't have enough clinicians, and I hate saying that as a clinician myself, but we don't have enough clinicians to deal with the sheer volume and demand. Patients and people want to engage. They want to help themselves. And of course, if you can support somebody while they're waiting, guess what? They're going to be more ready for that intervention when they get there. You're going to see less cancelled appointments, less cancelled surgeries, better health outcomes. And also, what we're talking about here is a hospital environment, but quite often that person or patient will turn up at the GP practice repeatedly while they're waiting because they're struggling. And so what this does is it also has that bigger system impact by reducing footfall to GPs, because patients can support themselves and have access to support today in a very targeted, bespoke way. And I think what I'm really excited about is the NHS has done so much work. And as Richard said, we should applaud that, both from a point of view of putting systems in, but also really impacting some of those waiting lists. But actually, where we are today is we have built an infrastructure that allows these technologies to be distributed in an automated fashion, but with personalization attached. And that's what I'm really excited about.
Yeah, I think having that explained is got me really excited as well. You use this term waiting well. Just to touch on that, there is a period of waiting and our populations are still growing and demand is still rising. So this idea of being proactive whilst you are waiting to give yourself the best possible chance and also to be able to take some responsibility. Can I ask you, Liz, I know this is what ORCHA is doing, but can you give me just an example of what that might look in tangible terms?
Yeah, absolutely. So what ORCHA do is we assess and assure technologies to make sure that they are safe and trustworthy. When we're doing that job, we're also working out not only is it safe and effective, but who will benefit most from it, and at what point in the pathway. Now, there are thousands and thousands of people waiting for a hip or knee operation. Somebody else may be living with diabetes, somebody else may be living with COPD. But actually, what we can do is contact them and say, what are you struggling with? And this is, AI can really help with this. Are you struggling with sleep? Are you struggling with pain? Are you struggling with exercise? And then they can answer that question. And then we can ask a series of other questions, which is much more personal. So do you want to connect up with social networks? Do you want something that will give you nudges? We can ask these questions. And then, as I've said, we've got this massive range of technologies out there that ORCHA have assured. And for me, this is, yes, waiting well and giving yourself the best chance. But waiting well for me means you're not just waiting. You actually are able to continue with your life in a more positive way.
Absolutely. Let's have a look at the process from validation to this ongoing engagement, this waiting well. And I'm loving this term. Richard, I'm going to want to bring you back into the conversation. And the beauty of conversational AI is its ability to engage with patients effectively, just as Liz has described. So how can this bridge the gap between validation and waiting?
The reality is that the evidence base has been known for years, right, Liz? We've known the value of the application of digital therapeutics in clinical pathways. I think that the reality is one of the constraints of scaling is the knowledge and awareness of staff, in many cases hard-pressed staff, to know and remember and identify the opportunities to connect individuals to opportunities to access services. We can't always expect staff to know everything that is available, everything that's supported for their patients, and connect them seamlessly and give them the time to help them onboard onto digital therapeutic and answer their questions if they've got questions about how best to download, how best to manage, and how best to engage. So the kind of joy of conversational AI, it can replicate much of what an individual, if they had the time and they had the knowledge, would be giving to the individual patient. It can talk to them exactly as Liz says and understand their specific needs and build a kind of bespoke formulary or offering for the individual around a set of support solutions that meet their needs. So we can drive increased adoption and adherence to these therapeutic tools, all stuff which is now built into clinical training 101, right? But what we don't have is we don't necessarily have the capacity of our clinical teams to do this consistently for every patient in the way in which they have the capacity to benefit. So, and finally, really just absolutely lines in with the 10-year plan ambitions, which are all about shifting care upstream. So really early engagement with individuals, identifying opportunities for people to self-manage and find ways in which they can rely less on specialist services and more on care closer to their home. So really giving people the tools to prevent the deterioration of care or the continuation of the condition.
But what about more vulnerable patients? What about patients who are perhaps having mental health issues, patients that are dealing with conditions like Alzheimer's or dementia? So these more vulnerable groups. Liz, how are digital solutions helping them?
So there's tens and hundreds of thousands of these technologies. And what's really heartening is that most of these technologies that are quality have been built by people who really understand the communities that they're trying to help. And so what we've seen is this plethora of technologies that meet these individual requirements. If you're from a different culture, you use a different language, you want a technology that meets that requirement. One of the big myths that has been out there, which is really starting to shift, is that there is one best technology. What I've seen over the years, not just in this country, but in other countries, is that systems have bought single point solutions for everybody in a community. And you talked about mental health. And if you take something like adults needing mental health support, of course, one technology won't meet everybody's needs. But in the past, what we've seen is that one technology has been bought for everybody, and that one technology has been distributed to that community. What we're now able to do is say, okay, we now recognise that that's a myth. Let's look at an ecosystem of technologies and deploy the right technology for the person who needs it. And if I give you a really simple example, if you take 3 people and they're all waiting for mental health support for anxiety, I can guarantee you that the same technology won't meet our individual requirements. Quite often that's based on personal preference. So I'll share with you one of my personal preferences for technology. I don't want to engage in social networks. It's a personal preference. So whereas you might find that you do want to do that, you might also want something that you engage with very readily. I might want something that I deal with at point of crisis. Now, as I said, we've got all the technologies, and because ORCHA have been assessing, evaluating, gathering this information for over 10 years, we now have this major repository of information on that marketplace. And because the technology has matured so much in the NHS, we can now just plug in that knowledge and via simple text messaging service, which we're all using, receive questions and receive bespoke interventions, which are targeted to meet my personal preferences. And one of the things I loved that Richard said earlier was, of course, the workforce is stretched, but the workforce isn't trained in all these technologies. It's mammoth. And so by using a technology platform, we can do this automated distribution without clinicians needing to spend, and it wouldn't just be hours, it'd be years and years of learning to learn about all these technologies. So it means that we can help people today.
Richard, I just wanted to stay with this idea because Liz has amply answered from her side and from what ORCHA are doing. But from an EBO point of view, if you're looking at a patient who has anxiety, there are going to be certain conversational triggers that are going to make finding a solution more challenging. How does conversational AI make that process more personal, more inclusive, more responsive to those needs?
Yeah, so EBO is a conversational AI platform supplier. What we're not is a medical device, and therefore we don't drift into acting in a way of diagnosing or trying to provide therapeutic or treatment support for any individual. And that's a really important distinction between what we do and where you'll find the digital therapeutic market and others which will need to demonstrate that they are providing efficacious advice and support to individuals. And Liz and her team do a brilliant job in assuring the quality of that. What EBO does is design and curate well-designed and inclusive engagement solutions for individuals using natural language processing, that those conversations are designed to be empathetic. So if individuals start to exhibit anxiety or concern, then they are adaptive to the emotions being exhibited by the individual. Usually those concerns or anxieties are not related to the nature of the conversation, but a broader issue that might be about their care. And what we wouldn't do in a normal, traditional transactional messaging solution would just be ignoring that. We can pick up prompts in the conversations and we can manage that through an appropriate route, be it a note or a warm transfer or a live transfer to alternative partner. We can deliver what we call kind of dynamic literacy. So if from the responses of the individuals that we're engaging with, we're not convinced that the individuals are necessarily fully appreciating or understanding the nature of the questions, then we can adjust the level of those questions to make sure that they are inclusive. And we can understand from the length of responses sometimes, or the nature of responses, that we've got the wrong pitch around literacy. Obviously language, so mid-sentence someone can change language and we can adapt with them, and we can shift from English to Polish and indeed over 100 different languages. And what we're not doing is we're not using Google Translate or just generative AI. We're using curated conversations, which are context specific, so that we're not going to hallucinate or bring in content which is entirely erroneous. They're trained within a very clear set of guardrails that ensures that we're only collecting and giving advice and information that has been designed in partnership with clinical teams to ensure that we stay within what is a safe and effective set of conversations. We can now channel those through a synthetic voice. So individuals can have a conversation on the phone and answer questions or guide their way, exactly as Liz says, to a set of support therapeutics that will be personalized to their needs. And we can also answer questions and concerns via those kind of voice prompts or virtual agent or traditional kind of web chat based approaches. So that can be done 24/7. And in many cases, if you take mental health as an example, we know certainly young people in mental health services sometimes actually prefer to engage with a digital channel as opposed to a human. They find it kind of far more able to be more candid and more personal and more engaged. And it's always, from our perspective, quite positive because it's quite standardized. So we will never forget anything. We will never lose patience. We will always stay within that conversation in an empathetic and engaging way.
It's very clear that what you've both been discussing here isn't just about shortening waiting times. It's actually about making the inevitable waiting time better, waiting well. I love that phrase that you used, Liz. So can I just ask you, Liz, to summarize, how can digital health tools make sure that this waiting well becomes part of the standard NHS practice?
What we're definitely seeing is there's a lot of challenges within the NHS, and for our NHS leaders, that's really tough at the moment. And so for them to put their head above the parapet and even look at these opportunities, that's really hard. And so my urge is that if anybody's listening to this, get in touch. We can help you today. And actually we can help all those people who are waiting today. And what I loved about what Richard said there is this isn't about replacing face-to-face. This is about getting the right thing, the right intervention to people and what they want. You know, I travel a lot, really simply, and I live with type 1 diabetes. I'm not always here to be able to go and see my doctor. So I would prefer a digital way of communicating with the NHS, whereas somebody else probably wants to have a face-to-face. By giving me digital, it frees up opportunity to see people face-to-face.
And I'm going to ask Richard again as a summary, what does success look like for patients and for the NHS?
Well, it's hard not to be just blown away by Liz's enthusiasm and passion here. We all entered healthcare ultimately because we want to delight and transform outcomes for the people who need the services. And we know the evidence base is absolutely there for digital therapeutics. It's unequivocal. NICE is accrediting therapeutics for use within clinical pathways. The 10-year plan envisages this as a fundamental. So the key challenge for us is not should we do this, but how do we do this, and how do we make sure that these are fully integrated now into people's care and treatment, right from kind of the early stage of engagement with the NHS all the way through to treatment. And the elective waiting list is just one brilliant use case, but there will be other use cases across the whole of the pathway.
I'm pretty sure anybody who's listening to this can relate on not just a technology-based or a solution-based level, but also on a very personal level as well. So what I'm taking away is that beyond validation is all about this connection, and it's about making every point of contact between the NHS and a patient meaningful. So by combining technologies like EBO's conversational AI and ORCHA's evaluated digital health platforms, the NHS can move from one-off validation to continuous, compassionate engagement, helping people stay informed, supported, and well, even as they wait. Look, Liz, Richard, thank you so much. It's been lovely talking to you. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us. If you'd like to join the conversation and continue this discussion, please contact us at hello@ebo.ai or visit the website www.ebo.ai. And until next time, stay well, stay engaged, and we will see you for the next episode.